What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified, fantabulous, fresh out of the NBA draft bunker co-host, Grant Hughes. We're going to talk about the 2023 NBA draft, all the fallout, some of the deals obviously leading into it. Before we do, though, please remember to subscribe to us wherever you consume us. YouTube, hit that sub button, like, comment on videos, help the algorithm love us back. And definitely subscribe on an actual traditional podcast platform, Spotify or Apple is obviously the best ones. And ratings and reviews on Apple help us out a ton in the charts as well. Follow us on all the socials at HardwoodKnocks on TikTok and Twitter, at Hardwood_Knocks on Insta, and join our Discord. The link to that is in the podcast description. We ran a listener mock draft where basically our Discord members mocked the draft and I reacted to it in an episode. So for fun things like that and mailbag solicitations, head into the Discord. And finally, merch. Grant is sporting the Hardwood Knocks cup behind him. He knows how to product place.
There it is.
I saw you do that, by the way, in the BR live stream the other day. I'm like, that's dedication. Like, that's real dedication. I have another thermonuclear AF shirt on because those are my favorite ones. So you should just load up on those. They're very family friendly, and you can get them for your kids. They could ask you what AF means, and you can explain that to them. And I think that's it. So yes, if you've done all those things, supporting the show, you could buy merch. Like I said, also just word of mouth recommendations. Shout us out on Twitter. Retweet our promos. VHole 9 +10 +11. Grant, how the heck are you doing?
I feel like I just was in a little tornado for a while or something like that. I don't know. It's also past it's not past my bedtime, but I'm an old person and I go to sleep really early and you don't. So it's 9:30 my time right now. And usually I have shut it down by now, but I'm doing this because you know what? It's draft night. There's only a few nights like this year. You got to suck it up for you as I complain to you, who's 3 hours later than I am.
Yeah, but I'm hoping to be in bed by like 8 in the morning. My sleeping schedule is out of control. And
you're a monster.
I'm an idiot. That's the word that you're looking for, is the real word. Yeah, I mean, I was actually shocked you wanted to do it tonight immediately. I thought you were going to want to do it on Friday. So I am all for this. And I guess we should just basically be going through and just biggest takeaways, just thoughts coming out of this, any fallouts. I did want to start with something that wasn't it didn't impact this draft at all, but the trade of Chris Paul to the Warriors, which I went on the Bleacher Report live stream with you, and I just declared that Chris Paul was not being traded to the Warriors. And I think 36 hours later, he's traded to the Warriors for Jordan Poole, who starts a 4-year extension that will pay him at least $123 million. And the Warriors also traded a 2027 second rounder, as well as a top 20 protected 2030 second rounder. Now, before I ask you your thoughts, I just want to say, I feel like I'm wandering through the wilderness when it comes to understanding the new CBA, because I thought I knew for a fact that the pick freezing for second apron teams began this summer. And so that they couldn't trade 2030. And then we find out it's 2031, or maybe everyone always knew that it was going to kick in next year. So I hate feeling, and if you have the detail somewhere, I'll figure it out and I'll learn the stuff and memorize it. But there's just no details out there. It's not even completed. So I remain frustrated. So I'm like, how are all these pick swaps? Even in the Beal trade, they ended up with 4 pick swaps, and I thought they couldn't include more than 3. And so it was just I'm just confused, and I hate feeling that way. That was my tangent.
I mean, I think there was an outcry among teams because the actual text of the CBA got to them 2 days ago or something ridiculous like that. And we just got the cap figures, 36 hours ago, was it, or maybe 2 full days ago? So you're not alone. The pick freezing stuff and when certain provisions kick in and when they don't, I have thought I had a handle on it, and then
couldn't they just be it phases in this season, right, not gradually?
Just do everything starting July 1, 2024 or something. Whatever. Should we talk about the trade? I mean, I feel like I'm going to hijack this conversation pretty quickly. So I would like to know what were your initial thoughts beyond the surprise? Because I agree with you. I did not. Well, I guess we can pull the curtain back a little bit. We did this live stream for BR, and we were supposed to pick destinations for high-end players, and we had Chris Paul, and both kind of thought of the Warriors. That's funny, but then no, it's got to be one of the LA teams, and then we just didn't even discuss the Warriors angle. So it is fair to say we are both surprised by this, but beyond surprise, what were your thoughts before I steal this?
So initially, and it's funny how much my thoughts on trades have changed. I did the solo pod for the Grizzlies Celtics Wizards trade, and I like have completely flipped from like I understand it from all three sides, but I really only like it for the Wizards now after kind of liking it for everybody. This one I did not like it immediately for the Warriors because I was like, I know Jordan Poole's value had like gone down, but this was a salary dump, and it still was when you look at it because Chris Paul is effectively an expiring contract. I doubt they guarantee his number for the 24-25 season. But the more I thought about it, top 20 protection on the pick, I think the value, Chris Paul's better than Jordan Poole right now. I am still shocked that like this is a level of like immediate buyer's remorse. They signed him in October. And I don't know how much the Draymond Green situation factored into how we got here, maybe how much he struggled. And he was dealing with that ankle injury in the postseason. I think it's a reasonable trade for them to make. And the opportunity cost is not much. Because I also thought like, well, now you can't even like there goes your no-brainer big number to include in a trade if you wanted to attach Jonathan Kuminga or more loosely protected picks for a higher in return. But no, like you could move Chris Paul like you did D'Angelo Russell. You could aggregate him again eventually too. So I think there were concerns on the court, but I like the idea because of what Chris Paul does as a playmaker of him being on the floor without Steph Curry. And then my immediate questions, which I think are the very surface level ones are, well, can he play with Steph? Will he be closing? You mentioned this to me. Is he going to be coming off the bench or starting? And I think the other thing here too is Chris Paul plays a very different style on offense than are the Warriors just going to spam a bunch of pick and rolls with Chris Paul with or without Steph Curry on the floor? And so I have a lot of curiosities, but I think I end up to just get out of Jordan Poole's deal. Like this isn't about a money saving thing. It's just right now it's clear it was an even lower value contract than I thought it was.
Yeah, I think all the questions that you raised and really any types of questions about Paul's fit are valid. I do think the most logical conclusion is that he will come off the bench and run second units and play a very different style. One that I do think, by the way, could be beneficial for guys like Jonathan Kuminga. And if Patrick Baldwin gets to play a little bit next year, and even Gary Payton, guys that need shots created, ideally would need shots created for them and are not, have not excelled playing the read and react, like really unique style of offense the Warriors have built around Curry and Thompson. Like that's just a weird way to play. Nobody plays quite like that. So that's the fit issues are real. The small ball getting smaller, if you think Paul is going to close over a conventional center for the Warriors with Draymond at the 5 is iffy. Defensively, I think it means that
Wiggins is your tallest
has to guard someone.
Then, right? Wiggins at 6'8" would be your tallest player in that lineup, I guess.
Yeah, like they just have like a bunch of guys that are small forward height or small or shorter.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are all questions. I think ultimately for me, I think Poole has a chance still, even after this past season, to be a very good starting level or better NBA player. I think it would never have happened with the Warriors.
Okay.
And that I just think, everybody acted about as professionally as could have been expected after the punch. And none of that, I think, in hindsight now, we should have all looked at all the right things said as nothing more than that, as like not all the right things that Poole and Draymond and Steph and Bob Myers and up and down the list said about we're trying to accomplish a goal. We can put this stuff aside and work together. That was just like that was an indication of maturity, I think, on the part of everyone involved, but it was kind of also bullshit because I think very clearly Poole just was not committed. Like, and I don't fault him. Like, I've never been punched by a teammate, but I could imagine that like I would be a little less bought in and have maybe even some like F you guys vibe for the way that everyone really kind of sided with Draymond after the fact. So it was not going to work in Golden State. And I want to emphasize that because there's a very real scenario where we're like halfway through December and Jordan Poole is averaging like 33 a game, and
shots?
No, I mean 43 shots to get that. Like, can't you see that, by the way? Like, he's going to get crazy numbers and there will be a subsection of NBA fans that are like, the Warriors blew it. Like, it's just, it wasn't going to happen. It's like the Wiseman thing. Wiseman, I think, like, there's an outside shot. James Wiseman becomes a good NBA center. It wasn't going to happen with the Warriors because of how they play and just the different timeline stuff. So, yeah, it's a bad look to move a guy that you just extended a year ago, less than a year ago, for what seems like, a poor return in Paul, who was maybe going to get waived. It was reported like a week ago. So it doesn't look great, but I just think the situation being what it was, it makes sense for the Warriors to do this. I don't know how much better they could have done with Poole. I don't know who else was out there hypothetically. So yeah, it's the best of a bad situation, I guess, because they were in a bad situation with Poole, and I just don't think it was going to work with him going forward. So I don't know if like the Warriors won the trade or yeah, I don't know how to look at it that way. It just felt like it had to happen, and it didn't happen quite the way we thought. But I'll put it to you. Do you think it could have gone on with Poole on this team? Like, or we have just gotten another year like this past one where everybody was just ready to like run him out of town?
I feel like it's so hard when you look at the players on like where you have almost at least 4 just critical spots sewn up. And so now all of a sudden Jordan Poole's either he's going to close or he's not going to play. And his role is going to be forever capped because you have Clay, you have Andrew Wiggins, you have Draymond, you have Steph. Nothing's ever going to happen to Steph. Poole and Draymond don't even play relatively the same position. And so, like, unless you were ever going to move on from Wiggins and Clay, who are both wings, and Jordan Poole's not that, but they take up perimeter spots, his role never could have grown. And I don't know how he would have built like upon, the way he contributed during their championship run in 2022. And I'm with you that I don't think it would have happened in Golden State. I was also lower on him though than you were to begin with. And so I'd be skeptical of what happens in Washington, but that brings me to, and this segues more into the draft itself. Do you like this deal from Washington's perspective? Not like a win or loser thing, but this felt like okay, it might be a fake first, because that first, like if it doesn't convey, that's it, because of the 2031 freezing at that point. So it's not going to convey. But did you think that this was like a reasonable return or gamble for them to make?
Well, without knowing what else was out there for Paul, if anything, it's hard to be sure. But I think ultimately I kind of do, because Poole is 24 and has been a key guy on a title winner and averaged 20 a game. And like, it's just hard to get that guy if the principal asset by the way, with like stuff attached, if the principal asset you're giving up is a 38-year-old that fits on like not that many teams in the league. And you know what I mean? Like Paul was not going to, we talked before, like Paul was not going to play for Washington. It would have like, it wasn't going to happen. So yeah, I think Poole is a reasonable, I guess you'd call him a buy low, right? Candidate. And he's young enough and is under contract for long enough at like a not horrible number. He's not making, the max or anything. So yeah, I think it works. I think it's fine for the Wizards. It's just like, they're so bereft of talent otherwise that like, it could be a situation where some bad habits develop and some like Gilbert Arenas stat hunting stuff, which, they're familiar with there. But yeah, I don't have a problem with Poole as like a solid return for a rebuilding team. He's young enough for that to work.
I think what the Wizards have now done. And so when you kind of look at the profile of everything that's happened, out of the door right now, Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, Jordan Goodwin, and Isaiah Todd, since Chris Paul was part of like an inbound trade at first. Mm-hmm. They're getting Jordan Poole, Tyus Jones, Danilo Gallinari, Mike Muscala. They had the number 35 pick. Golden State's 2030 first-round pick, top 20% protection, 4 first-round swaps from Phoenix, alternating years beginning in 2024 through 2030, and then 7 total second-round picks, basically 1 per year between it's 2024, 2025, 2026, 2 in 2027, 1 in 2028, and then another in 2030. That doesn't sound, nothing I read sounds like a caps lock haul. It sounds like just sort of a goulash of these random assets. But I look at this as, okay, Michael Winger and company inherited a situation where these were not his sins. The Wizards nuked Bradley Beal's trade value by giving him a no trade clause and the Supermax to begin with, but definitely no trade clause. They nuked the values of Kristaps and Kyle Kuzma by not trading them at the deadline. So you're going to limit when they have the power to opt out. You're still giving them a ton of leverage, and Kuzma's already opted out. So to get to a situation where you've taken flyers, and look, Bilal Coulibaly is part of this for me. I think it was definitely a reach going from 8 to 7, but it didn't cost you a ton to do it. And you got your guy who's already a defensive menace. He can do stuff in the open floor. And I think that if he ever develops any on-ball skills, like you've just found like a mega hit. And part of rebuilding is taking those risks. You don't want to overpay for them. And I don't think they did. You can overreach, but you don't want to overpay. And they haven't. And Jordan Poole's a part of that flyer. I also think that you can look at, Tyus Jones. Maybe he yields you a protected first-round pick from a contender. And that's value there. And next year with Jordan Poole on the books, like they can have, I don't know what's going to happen with Denny Avdia, but like the players that they're probably going to get rid of, they're looking at $60+ million in cap space, which is going to be, we've talked about this, hyper valuable in the new CBA climate, because I feel like teams are either going to get nervous or go through maybe 1 year in one or both of like past the aprons and then look to cut salary and attach value to that. And so I think they've set themselves up really well. And more than anything, even if you don't think this was good and you look at the return, and I don't think anything they did was, oh, that guy's going to be really good, or I love this. It was necessary. And there is value in finally making that decision to start over. And the Wizards doing it through all these steps, including in the, like, they're already operating differently at the draft. Like they went and swung. And also it is kind of diabolical of the Pacers to just like take that player because you know that the team behind you wants. So I love that, just to pick up that extra asset. But I think they're big winners just because they decided we are going to get off this treadmill of sub mediocrity.
Yeah, I mean, there's alternatives where, and they seemed likely, honestly, at the outset, where Washington was going to have to like give up stuff to get off of Beal, right? Like, or just for example, like there was never a path where you were going to have, you weren't going to get 4 unprotected firsts or whatever for Beal. Like the contract was just too bad. So it was always going to be like, this wasn't going to be a super clean rebuild where like the Thunder trade Paul George and suddenly the war chest is like overflowing.
Right.
And so to end up, by the way, some of those Suns swaps, those later ones, could be
28 and 30.
Like that team's window is not long. So even if, Devin Booker's great right now, should be great for several more years, but like the downside of that team now is probably about as low as any in the league, because they have nothing to get talent, via trade other than their 3 big stars. So yeah, I think Washington's done really well. I totally agree with you. And I love the like quote unquote reach in the draft. You are in a situation, Washington, where you're just like, just get the guy that has like a 5% chance at being a superstar and forget the guy that has like a 50% chance of being a rotation player. Don't care. Like, we don't need those guys. You got to just swing for, the most raw project like that you can possibly target. So yeah, I think Washington, like, to be where Washington is now compared to where they were just, I don't know, a month ago is like night and day. Like, and it shouldn't have been. I mean, this is kind of impressive. The more we talk about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, because you look at the players that they could have ended up with, and just like, I don't know, Jarris Walker, I'm low on. A lot of people like him, and I really love Taylor Hendricks, but as you said, he doesn't feel like he has that star it factor. And a team in this situation where you don't have all these extra first round picks coming down the pipeline, you kind of arguably, when you're in this spot of just the middle of the lottery, you need to take those types of swings. And after, the first 5, I guess Orsar Thompson wasn't guaranteed to go to the Detroit, but it did kind of feel like towards the end that it was very much going to be, like 5, maybe the top 4 were settled. And so if you're outside that, you need to make that swing, and this franchise specifically. And so I'm with you. Anybody else or any other teams, like what do you think we should hit here about, the draft?
That's a good question. I mean, we can kind of just get into like, well, one of the things I wanted to talk about, because I just briefly had this idea before we get into specific teams, because now, you know what, let's go to another team that I think we need to talk about before we get into like the more niche stuff. The Dallas Mavericks were very active in this.
I'm uncomfortable with how much I like what they did.
I know. And they're another team a little bit like Washington that I kind of felt like was short on options, right? Like we've talked about for their offseason is you got to get Kyrie Irving back at a number that is somehow palatable for you, and then just like figure out how to find wings and defense and a big that can guard, ideally in space, and protect the rim and all this other stuff. So the Mavs start out by trading Davis Bertans, one of the worst contracts in the league in terms of like what he actually produces. Not a crazy number, 17 million next year, with number 10 to OKC for number 12. 12 becomes Derek Lively II, who everybody thought was like the completely logical pick for Dallas to just take at 10. Right. So already you got a guy that makes total sense and fits and provides a lot of what you need. And you got off a contract that was going to be hard to move. So they create a traded player exception. You can jump in and get this wrong because I'm just going off the top of my head. But with the Bertans traded player exception, because they just sent him into cap space in OKC, they get Richaun Holmes and the number 24 pick from the Kings. And so now I'm going to try to remember his name off the top of my head. Olivier, oh, damn it. Max something Prosper. Max Prosper. Who, by the way, nickname is Omax. How sick is that? Great high-level NBA nickname, Omax. Big fan.
That's another sort of a product that a media company would be trying to sell.
Yeah, or he's like in WALL-E. He's like one of the robots on the spaceship or something.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen WALL-E, so that's be
okay. You're not missing much. So they got a couple guys that who knows, right? But in Lively and Omax, that could really be like high-end defenders. I'm gonna only call them Omax from now on. And they got off a bad contract, and Richaun Holmes is not that far removed from averaging like 14-8 and a block and a half as a full-time starter for the Kings. He's 29. If he's your backup or third center, man, like Dallas got into pretty good shape. Did I forget anything about the Mavs? Do you have anything? I mean, they're a huge winner from the draft, I think, for me.
I'm with you. And I think some people are going to say, well, why still didn't they like try to just move number 10 for good players? And look, there wasn't, unless someone was in love with Case and Wallace and the return was going to be that much different for the pick was clearly going to be Derek Lively anyway. So unless the return for Case and Wallace was going to be that much better, and look, it would have been harder for Dallas to actually integrate Case and Wallace because you have presumably Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. And look, the Richaun Holmes play I like on the court. They're going to have so much space. I think a part of it for Richaun Holmes, and he had the off the court stuff with his family towards the end of 21, 22, and then just having Sabonis, like it kind of just nuked your utility for the Kings. With how much space Dallas can still generate, like I'm kind of betting like we see a renaissance of him as a finisher and like a push shot extraordinaire coming off screens or whatever. And what they also did too is you've done two things. One of them is just very obvious. You still, I think it could be tight, but with like Richaun Holmes in place of Bertans, like you still have pathways to use your bigger MLE.
That's the other thing. That's what I forgot. Yeah.
And even if you can't access the full thing, like you are far enough below the first luxury tax apron that you can now access sign and trade scenarios. And so you still have Richaun Holmes' contract if you need it for that. You have Tim Hardaway Jr.'s bigger number. So there were still things that you could, not to mention now you have two quote unquote first round prospects. I don't know why they were first round prospects. I don't know why I use quotes on that. 2 first round picks that you can throw in with Josh Green, Jaden Hardy if you need to take a bigger spin. I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but they're deeper. They make more sense. Now, like Davis Bertans wasn't going to play for them. And if anything, so I don't know if you have anything to add on Dallas. Because I was going to say something about OKC really quickly. I was like,
get to OKC because that's a related thing.
OKC, I thought like they're just always going to take the gradual path, but I really wanted them. They had 30+ million in cap space. They now no longer have that because of Davis Bertans' money. He can actually shoot, so maybe they give him some playing time, especially if Dario Saric leaves and depending on how much Chet Holmgren actually plays. I wanted to see them go after like a PJ Washington, maybe even a Grant Williams, where the dream scenario was, hey, just go give Brook Lopez all the money. And I knew they weren't going to do that, but I still wanted them to do that. And so to see them just take on Bertans, who, as you mentioned, he makes only 17. And there are, I think the new, I might be wrong, but like the new salary cap floors are kicking in, I believe, this summer anyway. And even if they're not, like they're so far below it, it doesn't matter. And they didn't have a lot of roster spots to begin with. And now, unless you're waiving Bertans, you did take up a roster spot with this, but he is guaranteed $5 million in 24-25, and his salary will fully guarantee if he plays in 75% of the games. They have control over that, obviously, but that is something. If you wind up taking on 2 years of Davis Bertans to move up 2 spots, you really have to love Case and Wallace. I think he's a great defensive prospect. I think they're probably putting him in a, maybe not from a spacing perspective, but just in a role, in role terms, him as a secondary offensive weapon, or who will go up against some second units, because there are questions about his ability to create off the bounce. But what he brings defensively, having Lou Dort and him and wing Jalen Williams, and even just like Shea and Giddey, just like all these big, they're not quite wings, like they're just bigger guards. Like you have a lot of weapons at your disposal. And so I don't have an issue with it, but as someone who wanted to see, okay, because this season, and maybe you feel differently, it didn't feel like an incremental step forward. It felt like an arrival to
Mm-hmm.
where like, okay, now you're getting Chet Holmgren and you can add a significant player on top of that. They elected not to do that. And as much as we both knew, we want to be clear because we talked about, we both knew it wasn't going to happen. I still remain a little disappointed.
This maybe is a little galaxy brain, but is it possible that, like, obviously, Bertans was not like, we got to get this guy, but we're also, talked about Holmes and not being so far removed from him being a very different player than he was last year or the year before. We are not far removed from Bertans being like the guy that got the $80 million $80 million deal because he was one of the best movement shooters in the league. Like, he was hitting, even before he got, this with the Spurs, he was hitting ridiculous, 42% of just like tough shots, kind of like the Duncan Robinson profile, to a slightly lesser degree, but like the big, tall shooter that could hit everything, contested, difficult. And he really does provide something that the Thunder don't have. Like all those guys you just mentioned, like SGA is fine. Dort, super inaccurate. Teams let Giddey shoot. Jalen Williams, has had flashes, but has not been super consistent from deep. Like, if Bertans just, shows up for 20 minutes and gets off like 6 threes and makes 2 of them, and gets hot at the odd night, he just provide a skill that the Thunder don't have. Like, that is a real thing. And
that's true.
It is not impossible that he just rehabs his value and you can flip him for something positive incredibly. But I do think, again, I started this by saying this is probably galaxy brain, but like there's a scenario where he actually does help. Like, he has a skill they need, all the picks and all the other stuff aside.
And they probably have the defensive talent to insulate him defensively, either at the 4 or the 5, because if he plays at the 4 with Chet Holmgren, that's, and Bertans is definitely beefier than Holmgren. So you could throw him on like the thicker guys who are stationary and then just have Chet Holmgren do what he's best at, which is, he has like some switch to him and he can use his length, but he's just going to rove and like destroy things at the rim.
Yeah.
So that could work. Or you could try playing him with the 5 because you have, just between Giddey, Dort, wing Jalen Williams, J-Dub is what we should just really call him, just to differentiate. Like, and even SGA and now Case and Wallace, like, you have the perimeter insulation to maybe to where you can protect the rim from further away, and it's not as big of a deal that Bertans is your 5. So I don't hate it, but I'm just so in love with the Thunder that I wanted them to make like the win now nod, and they're not gonna do that. Not at this, like, it's so out of character for them to go that route.
Their patience is like bordering on annoying.
Like, Sam Presti probably doesn't even pay for Amazon Prime. Like, he just has like standard shipping.
He watches ads on everything.
What did you want to get to? You said like you had a more overarching point.
Well, it's still may be too early for it, but we may as well get to it because I think it kind of informs some of the other stuff we'll talk about. But so, we mentioned at the top that we're still just trying to understand the basic terms of the CBA, let alone like what the downstream effects of these new rules are. And there will be some, right? Like, every time we get a new collective bargaining agreement, certain market inefficiencies emerge, certain trends get established, and, teams try to operate the best that they can within the rules and try to find edges everywhere. And, it's not an across the board thing because like 4 of the top 5 picks in this draft did not go to college in America. Like, Brandon Miller's the only one. So it's not like the day of the high upside teenage prospect is over by any stretch. Those guys are always going to be the targets for bad teams that tend to pick at the top of the lottery. But you did see some older guys go to good teams that have cost concerns. And I think that's a little different than it used to be. And I wonder if that's because of all the extra punitive measures in the CBA for teams that get into the tax and especially deep into the tax. I'm talking about like Cam Whitmore hung out in the draft forever, fell all the way to 20, was mocked, top 5 consistently. Sam Vecini of The Athletic had him as number 3 on his big board. It's just like undeniable NBA frame, scoring talent. There were questions about, I guess, his medicals and his interviews and his workouts. But the point is, he lasted till 20. And before we get to him, right before he went, you had the Lakers take 20-year-old Jalen Hood-Schifino. You had the Warriors take 20-year-old Brandon Podziemski, and
congratulations, by the way.
And you had the Heat took Jaime Jaquez, who's 22. He's the oldest guy in the draft, just about. And those are all teams with cost concerns, and those are all teams trying to contend right now. And they all passed on a guy that clearly had top 5 talent. and is 18, is like over a year younger than Brandon Miller and Cam Whitmore. So it's not necessarily a trend because it happened once, in this draft in particular, but I do think everybody wants Christian Braun now, right? Even not that he's younger, but like, give me the guy that can play in the finals. Give me the rookie that's going to help right now, because we don't care about anything else. And like, the Warriors have not operated that way much to the consternation of the fan base. The 2 timeline plan was the opposite of that. It didn't work. The Heat drafted Nikola Jovic last year, who like the draft was like 2 weeks after his 19th birthday, and they're trying to contend. They did the complete opposite this season. So I just think that there's a small trend worth watching to see if like suddenly our 21 and 22-year-old collegiate prospects like finding their way into not necessarily the lottery, but the middle of the first round, where they used to maybe be going in the 30s or even later than that. Just like something, trying to look a little further down the road for some ripple effects here.
Well, I don't know how you could be wrong here. I mean, even look at and this is a good situation. Chris Murray with the Blazers, who is consistently mocked like in this spot, but like they're a team where it does feel like they're going to end up, and they're a team that we'll talk about, but it feels like they're going to end up trying to kind of thread the needle between winning, but we don't want to give up any of our real assets to try and win, namely Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson. So I think you're right on that. And as you already like mentioned, with how punitive, look at the teams that did it. It's not just the second apron teams. Like, let's use Portland as an example. If they want to keep Cam Reddish or Matisse Thybulle in addition to Jeremy Grant, like they all of a sudden have luxury tax concerns without kind of breaking up their roster. So it becomes mission critical to hit on these cost controlled players. And so I'm wondering I'm just going to assume you're right, but I guess we'll just the NBA is also just very reactive. It feels like, to where you're trying to spot trends, and like a pattern like doesn't just emerge in 1 year where it's, if this happens this season and maybe next season, or if it just goes, we saw Christian Braun this year. So is that how they're thinking now? And you also have the inverse case studies with what the Heat did, what the Warriors did for years. But let's just say none of these guys end up contributing at a high level for these teams. Like all of a sudden just pivoting back to, we're going to go over the high upside swings. Stuff like goes back and forth in this league so quickly.
For sure. The related thing to that too is, this is something that always bothers me, and especially this time of year when we're talking about draft and like, what's this guy going to bring to the team? And it's like, chances are, as a rookie, 0. Like if you're lucky, he's a net 0 player. And the fact is, if you get someone that's 19, by the time that player is ready to contribute, like not everybody's Anthony Edwards, for example, like the rare number one pick that within a couple years is like, okay, this guy is helping us win. It just, even at that high of a pick, generally, by the time that guy's ready to help you win, he's like 22 and you're ready to max him out. And it's like suddenly he's a $200 million player. And if he is great, you're just paying market value for that. So if you're a winner and you're an expensive team, you just got to get the guy on the rookie scale deal that's going to help you, like certainly by the second year. And because otherwise, just like there's no advantage. There's no like, you're not exploiting a market inefficiency by having a guy that's helping you at like a cut rate price. If you're drafting teenagers with high upside, by the time that upside's realized, you're paying them like superstars. So it's just, there's this little window, I think, that some teams, I think this draft suggests and logic would dictate, are like going to try to exploit having someone that can play right away, which is like still, by the way, really rare. Like just because even experienced rookies, just are a crapshoot as whether they're going to be like slightly negative or slightly positive in terms of their value.
Yeah, and so you mentioned Cam Whitmore already. What the medicals, and we know he had a broken leg, I think like very earlier on in his career. When they say, and I know a lot of this can just be spin in the moment, but when they say he didn't have good interviews, what could he have fucking said that would make him plummet from 5 to 23? Like honestly, what could you reasonably say in an interview that would make that happen?
I feel like we should have prepared a bit for this, but my first thought is just ask every team, like, where does James Harden like to go in every city, please? Could I just have like a list? Could you drop a bunch of pins and just give me, and those are red flags. No, I don't know. It's always so murky, because if it's a medical thing, I guess there's like HIPAA stuff where you just can't reveal that. You can like vaguely allude to it or leak it. But if it's an interview thing, it's got to just be, I have no idea. And like, we may never know. Right. This was I can't remember a fall like this in like recent memory. I'm sure there's one and someone will point it out and it'll be obvious, but like a top 5 guy to 20. And like if he hadn't gone to Houston at 20, I mean,
The
there's
Nets
no
maybe might have taken a swing on him at 21 or 22.
yeah.
And I feel bad unless he was asking where can he purchase like, children on the black market or something. If he would have gotten drafted at 5th overall, including that 4th year, those team options, he had a contract, I think about 4 years and 35 million, I think it would be up to. I'm not sure if it would have increased, but so 4 years and 35 million, maybe a little less. Now at 23, he's going to be at like 4 years and under 14 million. Again, these could go up a little bit. We're talking about at least a $20 million difference over the course of 4 years. That really sucks. It's just, I know he's 18, and if he hits, like, he has plenty of earning potential. And look, $14 million is more than like, that's a lot of money still.
He's
like,
good.
Yeah.
He's gonna be fine.
It just kind of sucks to see that. And without really knowing, because we just saw or heard, his medicals. And it's like, well, what did it say, that he didn't have any cartilage? Or it's like, what did these medicals say?
And, all these mock drafts and big boards are updated like up to within, the day of the draft. So what information broke all of a sudden that made it so guy everybody had top 10 for sure? Like I didn't see him outside the top 10 anywhere.
No.
And we're talking like up to the day of the draft. And then like, I don't know when it started leaking or that there was some concern or he might slip or whatever. But like the timing of it is baffling to me. I don't understand how somebody that is plugged into the draft wouldn't have flagged this as like, yeah, he's going to fall like 12 spots lower than the most pessimistic, projections out there.
So you mentioned this, or you said something that just made me think of it. And so before we get to, we need to talk about the Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller decision. And I think that segues into a larger discussion about the Blazers. But I want to ask you about this first. Are you starting to get uncomfortable, or are you starting to cringe at what is happening with the relationship between the way that news is reported and then sports betting odds? Because we saw it last year with what happened with Paolo Banchero, not coming out of nowhere, but it's Jabari Smith, and then all of a sudden it's not. Today, Shams begins the day by basically releasing information that says, Scoot Henderson is now in consideration for Charlotte. They take Brandon Miller, as we know. Woj comes out after the fact. And again, this could all be part of spin. Like you have to think about that, who their connections are, do they have shared agents? All of this stuff. Are they doing a solid? But Woj says, and he the fact that he said it was kind of just like shading Shams, it seemed, was that all along Brandon Miller was the Hornets guy. And I'm just like, now it's one thing if it's just an NBA reporter, but Shams is being compensated by FanDuel.
Sure.
And
we all will be someday in the industry, but
right. And which is, again, but it just, yeah. So, and then you saw the odds move. Darren Rovell, or I don't even know how to pronounce his name, and I don't follow him. Someone sent me the tweet that showed how the odds moved after Shams had tweeted it. It's like people end up wasting and they should know, obviously, but people end up wasting their money thinking, this is going to be the pick. And it's just like, it feels like we might be, it's cringy. And at some point, like, does something need to be done about, like, isn't this a moral dilemma, or no? Are we just going to lean even further into it? Like, there's a lot of power in these newsbreakers have a lot of power. And the fact that they have that power is not necessarily on them, but to then be compensated by, and I want reporters to make money. Like I'm pro people in our business making money, go figure. But it just feels very like I just feel
Yeah, it's sort of an extension of, but also like a totally different and a little like ickier tentacle of how at some point in the last, 5 or 6 years, we started being aware of like what agencies represented the newsbreakers in the NBA and other sports too. But like, we obviously don't, I don't know who represents like Adam Schefter, for example, because I don't follow the NFL like we do the NBA, but like, and then you started imputing, so-and-so is reporting this, not just because like it used to be like almost quaint. It's like Woj would only report, like always have the line into Joe Dumars. So all your Pistons information would always be good. But then like the Cavs hated him, or like they hate Windhorst. And so he never gets anything from them. And that's how it used to be. And then it became like, well, Clutch represents this player or this coach and this reporter. And so it's always a little interesting who reports what and why. Because like the incentives of previously like separate entities kind of aligned. So the gambling thing adds a whole other layer to it. I don't really know what I think about that. I would certainly say it's bad if people are reporting things because it moves lines for some reason and makes more money for the betting company. But like, I don't know that we can say that actually happened or not, but there's a lot of weird overlap that feels kind of like, I don't know if this is the way we need to be going.
And even if it's not deliberate, even if it's not, look, like FanDuel, look, come pay this podcast all the money in the world. And if, as long as you're not telling us like what predictions we need to make, there's no issue. But like, even if like Shams being paid, like when you're breaking that type of news and he's not endorsing a bet, like, so it feels very thorny and icky. And I doubt anything will be done about it. I would argue that it probably only gets like more intertwined from here would be my guess. But it was just like, this is the second year in a row that something like this happened near the top of the draft. And it's just, and I don't think it was Shams, like it was Woj who, I hear actually who broke the news that moved Paolo Banchero all the way up. And that ended up being the answer. In the end. Like Jabari Smith Jr. is at the top of these boards. And I'm pretty sure like Woj and Shams were both kind of tweeting that to begin with. And then it was like this last second revelation. It's like, there's no way. I find it very hard to believe that they went from, firmly in the mix, but the reporting was, no, he was just our guy. Like there's just someone's like fucking up somewhere, or it's just
part of it
funny somewhere.
Part of it too is just the general, I'm sure people did not tune into this to hear us discuss the state of media, but like the general, you not that these guys have quotas, but like you got to report something. And so report it fast. And like the odds of like very reputable news breaking reporters being wrong, I think are just higher now, or like to get conflicting information or to get information from a source that feels new because it's different from what the previous reporting was or what other outlets have reported. So like, man, I got to run with this because this is a big deal. This is a new development. And maybe you don't vet it as closely as you should. It's just the speed of things as much as anything too, is like anything that is different from what's already been reported. There's like a double premium on like, let's get that out if it's like halfway verifiable, and we'll deal with it being inaccurate if we have to. I think it's just the speed of the news cycle as much as anything. Although I will say Orlando has a reputation, talking about the Banchero thing, of nobody knew what Orlando was going to do in this draft either. Like, I think there are certain organizations that just are good at lying and smoke screening and misdirecting. And I think Orlando is kind of one of them.
Yeah. Them in Oklahoma City, which is actually not surprising because I think some of their front office hails from Oklahoma City, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember.
I think everybody's got a piece of Oklahoma City's front office now. That's who you want.
I mean, Sam Presti had to be proud of Michael Winger just trading up to get like the reach. It's just something that Sam Presti would have done.
Get the athlete. Yeah, for sure.
So Scoot versus Brandon Miller. Like, how did you feel about the Charlotte Hornets going Brandon Miller there?
I'm opposed to drafting for fit. Like, I don't know what my cutoff is, but certainly anywhere in the lottery. Like, you can't be, if you're in that position, chances are fit is like not your primary concern. You just need high-end talent and you should take the best player. And I think, I think agree with me. And I think most people agree that Scoot is just the better player. So I just think I don't care about the overlap with LaMelo there. I think you just take the guy you think is a better player. And if they just decided that Brandon Miller was a better player, I get it. Like, there are worse things than taking a big wing who can play both ends in the modern NBA, like as opposed to a 6'2" guard that's hyper athletic and great. Like, I don't know, you could make a case to me that Brandon Miller is like, he's just going to be better. I don't think that right now. I think Scoot is, most people whose opinions I respect view him as just like, he's got the best chance of being an all-star lead guard of, he would have gone ahead of LaMelo in that draft. Probably he might've gone ahead of Edwards. He might've gone ahead, just go back through, highly selected, lead guards or point guards. And chances are he would have gone ahead of like most of them over the last 5-10 years. So I would have just taken him. Or I would have just, what can we get? Like, yeah, we're going to take Scoot. Somebody come make an offer, maybe they do there.
Which makes me wonder if like Brandon Miller was actually their guy then. Because why? Because if you're trading, it's not necessarily, if you want Brandon Miller that badly, you only have the market of Portland. Because you can't trade him to like New Orleans was hot for Scoot. You were going to trickle down and get who at number 14 that you really liked there. And so Yeah, I think hopefully you make this pick because you think Brandon Miller is going to be better than Scoot Henderson. I don't see it, because when you're looking at what the NBA values most, which I think would just be, it doesn't have to be in the form of a guard, but just this advantage creation who can power your entire offense.
Mhm.
I don't see that in Brandon Miller. And maybe it's
Yeah.
easier to pivot towards him because you have LaMelo, but like LaMelo's not going to put a ton of pressure on the basket unless he gets like super strong. That's not someone who's just like he kind of his in between game is what I would call budding, but it's just they could use another creator because they're kind of peppered with all these, secondary guys where it's okay. PJ Washington did some more stuff this year, not a ton, just by extension. You have Gordon Hayward when he's healthy, but he's not going to be there much longer. Terry Rozier is very much overtaxed in that role. I'm assuming they're going to have Miles Bridges back, but that almost having Miles Bridges back, if you're planning on keeping PJ Washington, almost would have been the vote against. Well, then they really must be high on Brandon Miller because maybe he's not as much of a no-brainer fit as you think. I mean, they can play an interesting style like LaMelo, and if they keep PJ Washington and Miles Bridges plus Brandon Miller, like that's a pretty, like LaMelo, what is he, 6'6", and he's the smallest of those three. So like I'm not ruling it out. I just felt like Scoot is so clearly the better prospect. I will say though, there were people who I also respect that said the gap is not as big as people are making it out to be. And I will always, when it comes to draft stuff, just default to people that I respect and know more than my own opinion.
And like it is still, even at this high of, we're talking about the second and third pick, this high in the lottery, it's still kind of a crapshoot. And let's say like the Paul George comp, not just because Brandon Miller, this whole thing about calling Paul George his GOAT, like I don't care enough to pay attention to that whole news cycle thing, but like Paul George is a reasonable comp based on some of the film that I've seen. Just, like I could see the flashes of it. That'd be a pretty good outcome. If Scoot is like Derrick Rose that doesn't get hurt, then that's also a really good outcome. But we could have a debate about would a healthy Derrick Rose versus a Paul George, who had the better career. Like it's pretty close, but then I guess the problem is Paul George, as great as he's been, has never been like the number one guy that you're hoping for. He's been super close. And Derrick Rose probably was and might have been going forward had he not gotten hurt. So like, I think your point is right. You need the guy that is the advantage creator on offense. It doesn't really matter what position he plays. And it just seems like Scoot is more likely to be that guy. Although Paul George would be great. Like if Brandon Miller's Paul George, I'm not going to have a complaint about that.
Right. And if it's like, if Scoot becomes someone better than Ja Morant, which is what a lot of people like, just better than Ja Morant. I don't know what that player is. I'm just Derrick Rose's prime was so short. I don't want to compare him to him. And then Russell Westbrook just doesn't feel, I think he's going to be a better shooter than Russell Westbrook, but maybe I'm wrong there. I mean, if you're getting someone who's better than prime Russell Westbrook, then yeah. But it's like, even if you get someone who's better than prime Russell Westbrook, but you drafted someone who is prime Paul George, are you going to feel, honestly, I would argue that there's a chance that player, the Paul George one, opens up more avenues of team building because they're easier to fit. They maybe can't run your entire ecosystem, but they can be a part of more versions of an ecosystem.
Sure. Yeah. It's defensible. Like it definitely is. And it's going to, how many years is it going to take before we know who the right pick was? Like 8? Like, is it going to be full 10 years? I mean, it's possible it's going to be that long.
From the Blazers perspective, I think any criticism, and I didn't see too much of it, but I also am not as online as I used to be with Twitter, mostly because of you. So hat tip to you for preserving some of my sanity. You can't just be like, the Blazers kind of fucked up here. But in the interim, I think that they're not losers, but it's like, you guys need to fucking pick a side of the fence here. Like but you get the first 4 picks in this draft were considered transformative talents, and definitely the top 3. You got the guy who was by consensus with the second best player available. You don't just trade that pick for immediacy's sake. And by the way, he could still be traded. Like these deals could come together over the offseason. Andrew Wiggins wasn't traded to the Timberwolves on draft night. Like, so after free agency settles, things could change. So I understand why you wouldn't just move the pick. I even look at number 23. And it's like, okay, you go to Chris Murray. It's not like you punted on someone that had a ton more upside and he comes in and he could fit a bunch. It did make me wonder, like, and we'll get into this next team very quickly. Like, are they a little bit worried about Jeremy Grant? Maybe not being coming back. But I understand why you would view Shaedon Sharpe as nearly untouchable. But now, if that's where you're at, if it's Scoot is our guy, Shaedon Sharpe is our guy, we're not moving him. It would take a Godfather offer, and it's on the trade market to meet our demands, which I think that's a fair stance to take and an arguably smart one. But if Damian Lillard really wants to win, which he has said he wants to win, he's on record. He said he wants it in Portland, but he has said he wants to win. Portland is not set up to win right now, and they're also not set up to make a leap without going nuclear. You can bring back Jeremy Grant. You have Matisse Thybulle and Cam Reddish. Your best trade packages, if Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson are off the table, are Anthony Simons plus. And by the way, I think Simons has probably become underrated. Like, give me someone who can hit off the dribble threes and play off the ball. Just
right.
I don't care about
how old is he? 23.
And the contract is like it's $25 million on a $136 million cap. It's like sub 20% of the salary cap at this point, or whatever it is. But it's him plus first allowable first round picks, because you have that lottery protected selection through 2028 going to Chicago. Who is that getting you that is going to nudge you in the direction of Damian Lillard's timeline? So you're not good enough to straddle both sides of the fence. And so right now, I feel like they are caught between two separate trajectories that are at war with one another. And I don't think that's a good spot to be. If Damian Lillard says, you know what, this is fine, great. I would love to see Damian Lillard, Scoot, and Shaedon Sharpe play together. You know what? Throw Simons out there. Let's just play with 4 guards, basically, and Jeremy Grant at the 5. Like, let's really fuck shit up. But I'm not trying to assign my beliefs about what stars should want to Damian Lillard. He has said he wants to win. So unless he's lying, so I'm just like, you need to, it feels like we're headed, or that we're in this weird, awkward game of chicken where one side is waiting for the other to initiate the divorce. And it's just like, people, because I understand Portland's logic here, but it doesn't align with what Damian Lillard says he wants and what the organization has indicated that they want to do, which is compete with him. I know you saw the Chris Haynes tweet about Siakam today saying he wouldn't re-sign with whoever he's first of all, I just like Chris Haynes, very plugged in. And so I immediately thought he has connections in Portland. I know it seems like he's really friendly with the players, so you would think that maybe came from Siakam or his agent, Todd Ramsar, who's been on the podcast, by the way.
Call him up. Let's get some answers.
Yeah, he's going to give me absolutely nothing if I ask him. But for me, I kind of thought, like, is Portland trying to lay the groundwork here? Like, we couldn't even get Siakam for the number 3 pick. Why would we move it? And so if the trade market wasn't, if they got offered Zion for this pick, if that was out there, does it sound like it was? And even if you didn't want to take Zion for it, but like, you have to pick a direction. You are not set up to follow this in-between route again, unless what Damian Lillard says he wants changes.
So first of all, Anthony Simons is 24. I was wrong. He had a birthday 2 weeks ago.
He's so old. Yeah.
Happy birthday. Yeah.
I take back everything I said.
No, I think I've decided in the last 3 minutes that the move is trade Damian Lillard. And I think the reason it hasn't happened is the Blazers would like him to initiate. They would like him. I don't know how you'd frame this. They want him to win the game of chicken or lose it, or be the one. They want him to make the decision. Doesn't that seem like the most logical thing? Just because, especially, I mean, he doesn't have a no trade clause, so it's a little different, but the Bradley Beal thing is just, you got to just do it. You have to do it, because there's not a scenario, I don't think, where Portland, and this is not news, this is some version of what we've talked about for, I don't know, years. The Blazers cannot build a contender with what they have. And in fact, they shouldn't, because they have Sharpe and Simons and Scoot and potentially cap space or just younger guys or picks or whatever. That's the foundation of a pretty fun team that has a high, maybe a higher ceiling than you're going to get with Dame and Jeremy Grant and Yusuf Nurkic and whatever else you add in by trading one or more of these guards you have. They're not going to contend. It's not going to happen. And Lillard just had the best season of his career. Now's the time, because as he gets deeper into his 30s, the odds of him repeating that are not good. And the odds of decline are basically a lock. Right. So it just seems the most logical explanation is Lillard has not said trade me, and Portland is just waiting for that to happen, because otherwise you're totally right. It's what are we doing? How much longer are we just going to keep, trying to, appease our superstar that everyone loves, while also accumulating awesome young talent? You can't do both. It doesn't work.
And the other thing here is you don't want to run the risk of getting into a Bradley Beal-esque box to where it's like Damian doesn't have the no trade clause, but his contract is long and substantial enough that you could reach a point where it's just, especially with the new CBA penalties being fully kicked in by the start of next season, to where you're not going to get like the value you could get from him now coming off a career season. I mean, like I would say the floor would be too much because I'm sure they're going to work with Damian Lillard to know where he wants to go. But I would say the floor, even under those circumstances, is to Miami for their I saw people say that they give up 4 first-round picks, and I guess that's true.
3.
I thought it was 3 too because they owe the 2025 to I'll have to double check that, but I would say the floor is Miami's offer of salary, whether that's Tyler Hero or not. I don't know why. Maybe Portland would be interested in Tyler Hero if you have Simons and Sharp and whatever. But I would say salary and 3 first-round picks is the absolute floor. And I would even in the floor, I would say that floor is the 3 swaps that they could offer. Because look, so they have this year at number 18. And who did they take again at number 18? Why am I blanking? Oh, Yaquez Jr. They mispronounced that. So you have him. So let's call him a first-round pick. Your 2025 is owed to Oklahoma City, and that is now unprotected. So you can – oh, no, it's unprotected in 2026? I thought they unprotected – I'm pretty sure they can only move 3 first-round picks and 3 swaps. Which
they adjusted the protection on that to be able to move 3, I think, total.
So that is – I think that's the floor, is the 3 picks and let's just say 3 swaps that they could offer. So – like you could get a haul for him now. And again, if he is fine not contending for a title, I just, I'm with you. I think the move is I'm getting our editor, Brian Knox, hitting us. Our article was good enough to be published tonight, Grant. Shout out.
Hey, high five.
Peek behind the curtain. So I'm with you. I think it's time to trade Damian Lillard is what it feels like. And again, unless we're missing something here.
Yeah, right. Let's see. We've hit. You got another winner or a loser you want to, or just like a big story you want to hit from tonight? I'm trying to think.
One we didn't hit that we probably should have, and they're already angry at us in the YouTube comments, so I shouldn't say anything, even though I just staunchly disagree with people who are 1, condescending to us about it, but 2, about the philosophy. Did the Orlando Magic kind of fuck up?
Okay, that's a good point. I was going to ask you about this when we were working earlier. I really like Anthony Black. But I don't know about the fit because how different is he really from Fultz other than he's bigger, right? Because the knock is shooting. And like, I guess there's the Magic were really good for long stretches, especially in the second half of the season with a non-shooting, or a non-threatening shooter at the point. And so this is just, there's that theory works. It's okay. It's just not, we've harped on it forever. It's just not the optimal way to work when you have 2 forwards who I think can be your primary playmakers. Now, like Black could learn to shoot, and then you've got a real player. Like then you've really got something because he does everything else really well. And he's by all accounts hyper competitive and just a good player. But yeah, it's a weird fit. And then I don't really have strong thoughts on Jet Howard at 11. Obviously a shooter.
Movement shooting makes sense, but you kind of add, another. I think even like sized player is the wrong way to describe it.
So then, what was the pick for them? If it wasn't,
that's
that I'm asking myself too, because my first thought was like, oh, I don't know about that. When they picked Black, I wasn't in love with it, but it's not like if one of the Thompsons had fallen, like you kind of run into the same issue. Jarris Walker wouldn't have made sense. I don't know if anyone else was going to reach on Coulibaly. We're just talking about guys that went in that same range. So, do you want him to take Grady Dick at 6? That seems too high. Just then you get your shooter. You wanted actually, I kind of like Kobe Buffkin better than Jet Wallace. I thought Buffkin would go first, and Buffkin I kind of wouldn't have minded there. But yeah, I don't know what the pick would have been, but it did feel like not only they could have traded those picks, they could have packaged them. I'm sure they pursued this, and because it's Orlando, we'll never know, and there will be no reporting about it. But yeah, it's hard to be too critical because they got 2 players that were mocked around the area they went, and that's the best you can do sometimes. But just would have liked a little something more.
Yeah, I love Anthony Black, and I hate his fit on the Magic. But we just said that you go for best player available, and if he was your best player available, I get it. I do find it funny though that after a lot of Magic fans saying we don't need a point guard, that they went and they drafted like the bigger playmaker who projects as the primary ball handler. And it's like, well,
Right.
clearly they might feel differently.
The best guy available who theoretically plays that position was who they picked. So
the other team I wanted to get to, at least for me, and I don't know who else you might have that you want to talk about, is the Sacramento Kings. Did some interesting stuff on this. They were part of the Mavericks having a good night by getting Richaun Holmes. They sent Richaun Holmes and number 24 to Dallas. They took nothing back, like no salary back. So I have them. They can get to just over $35 million in cap space this year because so you got rid of the pick hold, Richaun Holmes' money, which is like almost $15 million total itself. Plus the cap went up $2 million projected. So you can get over $35 million. You have to renounce Harrison Barnes. You have to renounce Trey Lyles. That $35 million gets you in a lot of, I would think, should be interesting conversations. It's right in the range of where the number was released for Chris Middleton, where it's going to take 4 years and 130. It's definitely in the range of Jeremy Grant. It's more than enough for Kyle Kuzma, I would argue. And those are all guys, by the way, who would significantly, I think, or they could plausibly upgrade the Sacramento Kings at both ends of the floor. I think Kuzma, when you get into his defense, is a little bit iffy. Like that means something. And this doesn't feel like you don't make this move to say, hey, we're going to use our cap space on like two players. Cause like, yeah, the depth might be intriguing, but I still would just be a little bit disenchanted of punting on a first round pick to do that. And so it makes me wonder, like, are they simply rolling the dice here? Or do they already just have like a firm hold that, hey, one of those three that I just named is coming? Or are they a team that could pull off like a wild trade because they now have all this, cap flexibility? And by the way, like, I know a lot of people might say, well, who are you going to get that's better than Harrison Barnes? There maybe aren't a lot of better options. There are a few, but like, even if you spend your cap space, like now the room exception, like, what is it, like $6 or $7 million, whatever it is now, like that could probably get you a rotation player. And so to me, they've suddenly become one of the most fascinating teams of the offseason.
And I think that's true, especially because they feel like an ambitious team to me. I agree that this is not a move they made as like an end in itself. But I don't know what the plan might be, because maybe they're the team that starts throwing. Well, you can't just do more than one of these, but are they the team that just goes, hey, Cam Johnson, like take all the money? Or
PJ Washington, maybe
PJ Washington and Grant Williams. We'll sign you both to offer sheets that are maybe more than or right around what your teams might be comfortable paying, and we'll get one of you. Like, I think they could get in the restricted game. They could, I'm not sure which like Brook Lopez. You already have Sabonis. You're not going to go throw a bunch of money at him. Although, like, I think you might say that team might actually be better if they had Lopez versus Sabonis. That's a debate for another time. But you can definitely, like, you can take on money, I guess. If there's lots of options. They're gonna do something. But and in our assignment, you label them a TBD team for a reason, because we're not, like, the other shoe has not yet dropped on the Kings offseason plan. I do hope, though, this isn't just like, well, we wanted to clear enough money to do something else, and we are also just going to pay Harrison Barnes to come back.
Like, if the end result is, hey, we want to bring back Harrison Barnes and be able to sign Dylan Brooks, like, no, that's just not going to do it.
It feels bigger than that. It feels like there's more potentially happening, which, like, if you're the Kings, shoot your shot. You just, you had a great regular season. You saw some flaws get exposed in the playoffs, and, like, go for it, man. The time's now.
I did have, because we saw their interest in Bradley Beal was reportedly real.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just like this moment where I was like, is that going to be parlayed into like James Harden interest on the trade, which would just be a terrible fit, because I didn't think the Bradley Beal chase, especially if it was aggressive, didn't really make sense.
No,
to me. The James Harden one makes even less sense because you're not going to move him off the ball and he's older. But I was just like, I mean, if you have 35 million in space, like, that might be a number that gets you in like the meetings with James Harden if it's for 3 or 4 years.
I really hope that this does not isn't like a prelude to just a full reversion to Kang's like decision making. I don't think it is, but I'm scared anytime it feels like the Kings are like ramping up to do something. I'm not. There's been too many years of where that continued to happen to be totally free of that feeling.
But it makes sense on its face, because they just finished third in the West. You push the Warriors to 7 games. You have Fox turns in a career year. You know what you have in like Keegan Murray. You have Kevin Huerter had a great year. so there's just, and so you know what you have in Sabonis, and you kind of have to be aggressive because he's extension eligible. He might not sign one, and then like you need to make sure that he's not going to leave you in free agency next year. So I'm cautiously excited about because it doesn't feel like, and this is just belaboring the point out, it doesn't feel like this is going to be broken up into like, okay, well, we're going to keep Harrison Barnes and Trey Lyles and then get like another guy who could be like our 6th or 7th best player. It feels like, oh no, like they're going to get someone who's a part of their closing lineups.
Yeah, no, I agree. We forgot, if anyone who's made it this full hour in already, the Spurs drafted Victor Wembanyama. That seems good. That seems pretty neat. I wasn't sure who they were going to take at number 1, but I think they made the right decision. Time will tell.
Here's my concern is that we never saw whether Wemby holds up against, like Creighton on a Tuesday night. And so how are we sure?
How can we know?
He's just transcendent. How are we supposed to know? That's like my main concern. They're another team that I really just hope uses because they have a ton of cap space now. I just want them to be like, we need to bring in someone. It doesn't have to be a lot like poison pill Austin Reeves, like you said, or like, hey, Brooke Lopez. Like, do you want like a 2-year, like $50 million deal?
Those are my two guys. I want them to just bring them in. I mean, they can't get either of them. It's not going to happen. But
if you're Brooke Lopez, it's just like, hey, 2 years and $50 million, you wouldn't do it.
I would think about
it. That you just get bought out by the end of year 2 anyway, and so you just go sign with the contender or something at that point.
Go back to Milwaukee.
So is there anything else that we missed or that you thought like coming out of this that you wanted to hit? Did you have any stray thoughts about the Celtics or did we talk about the Grizzlies? Oh, I talked about the Grizzlies. Did you have any thoughts on like that trade?
I don't hate the Marcus Smart get. I feel like their side of it has been the most negatively talked about. But both because I'm not going to say anything revelatory here. I think this is just the correct take. Like, if John Morant's not playing for 25 games, Marcus Smart can do that. And then when he's back, he can be the Dillon Brooks piece and be better at all the things Dillon Brooks is bad at and maybe not as good defensively because he slipped, I think, defensively for Boston this past season. But slipping from being the defensive player of the year, I mean, that's still pretty good. So I think Smart makes a lot of sense. I don't know about the other assets going out, but like I can see you're not all the way on board with that. I'm curious why you don't like it as much because he wasn't someone I thought about at all when we're going through the Anunobis and the Bridges and all this other stuff. Is it because he's kind of underwhelming relative to those types of guys for you?
Right. And I think so. I look at it as this is that you probably traded Tyus Jones, a backup point guard for you, and the number 25 pick. And then let's just use Golden State, same spot next year, the number 19 pick for Marcus Smart is under contract for the next 3 years. That is not terrible value, but also Dillon Brooks is part of this equation too. And so you're getting Marcus Smart because he's going to replace and I think he upgrades your defense relative to Dillon Brooks. Maybe you trust Brooks more one-on-one, but Marcus Smart can be moved up and down the positional spectrum. Like Dillon Brooks isn't going to be okay against 4s. And like Marcus Smart can very much do that. I did see there was too many Grizzlies fans that seemed to think that Steph Curry modeled his offense after Marcus Smart. He's not this incredible shooter compared to Dillon Brooks.
But he's a less damaging.
He's a less damaging shooter because he doesn't take as many off the dribble jumpers. And defenses do, when you kind of go back and look at playoff series, like he said this year in the playoffs, he hit like 39-40% of his catch and shoot threes. Defenses are still inclined to maybe play up more on him than a Dillon Brooks.
Yeah.
He's a better passer. And so that helps you. But what it's like, it feels like though, you kind of, here's my issue with it. I'm trying to like frame it is Marcus Smart, like you gave up Tyus Jones as part of this and John Morant missing time has to be part of the equation too. You gave up ball control here. Marcus Smart's not a better passer than Tyus Jones. He's certainly not more economical. It's like you've now increased your variability there. Yes, he can more comfortably play next to John Morant than Tyus Jones can. But like it does come with a playmaking or a ball control concession. And then it's like, so it feels like you're trying to replace or supplement too many things with one where, okay, the biggest need for this team was a wing that had some semblance of a floor game, a properly sized wing. A lot of people have called Marcus Smart basically a wing. He's 6'4", and he's not like, he doesn't have the offensive game of really a wing. And so I think if you're going to give up 2 first-round picks to where now you are net negative. If you're not, you still have all your own picks like after this season. So you're technically a net neutral now with picks. You did give up this year's. to not even address what's been your biggest need for years as part of that deal is just, it's not, oh man, they're fucked, but it's uninspiring.
Yeah, I think part of it is because we just got anchored to the idea of, over the last year plus, Memphis and New Orleans was the other team, are just poised to like go get the guy. Like they got the assets, they're really good. And so you could dream really big, and we did. And Smart is not that player. I just think he's an upgrade, certainly offensively, because like Brooks is the type of shooter that just cripples your offense against a good playoff team, and Smart is not at that level. And
he's taken like
I
3
take your
times.
point that it's kind of like, this is the guy. Like I don't know. It's not quite as.
Then you come back to the value, and it's like you let Dylan Brooks walk. You're trading Tyus Jones, who's on an expiring contract, and then you're trading 2 bottom 12 first round picks for Marcus Smart. And so it's like a no brainer, but it's like it feels like, I don't know what team would be it feels like Portland under Neil O'Shea, where it's, hey, we're going to dip our toes in and never just go for the actual all-in move that could be the game changer. It was framed this way by Kevin Pelton, which I thought was a great way to frame it. Do you feel better or worse or the same about Memphis's 2024 title odds than you did before this trade?
I feel better. Like that's an easy answer for me.
Okay.
Just because, yeah, I think I think I'm coming down on it as, it's not as exciting as I would have liked it to be, but I think it's still an upgrade. I think they're still just better than they were at the end of last season. Because like Jones may be a starting point guard, but he will not be that full time for the Grizzlies. And like you can't play him and Morant together. And it's like, it's weird because, like you said, Smart's not just replacing Jones, he's also replacing your starting small forward. So it's like, well, you still need another guy, in theory, to replace what Jones did. But yeah, I don't know. I think I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I think I like the Boston side. I like the Washington side. That trade is kind of a win across the board for me.
It feels combustible across both the Boston and Memphis parties, because I guess, is Boston just deciding we're going to play with 2 bigs here? Well, or are they not done? And then it's, when you have Horford and KP on the floor, that's like 14 feet worth of mediocre rebounding, which is just sort of weird. And we thought they needed playmaking before.
Yeah.
They just traded their best passer, and it's just to ask Tatum and Brogdon if they keep him, and then Jaylen Brown, of course, and even trying to run stuff through Horford. And then now you elevate Peyton Pritchard, who felt like he was a trade candidate, but unless they do another deal, it feels like he almost has to be there. It feels like a lot could go wrong, but I like it in theory because Horford's 30, what is he, 37, 38? He's up there. He shouldn't be playing 30 plus minutes a game.
Yeah.
RW3 is never available. And then even Kristaps Porzingis has had a good run of health in Washington, but they were able to give him breaks this year, like because their season was in the toilet. Between those three, like how many games will they all be available? Like if you set the over under like 47, I'd probably still think the under.
That's tough.
And look, it's a short term because he's on an expiring contract technically, and even his extension, it's probably going to end up being for like 2 years or so. Even if you give him the max, which is 105% of his salary, 2 years and 78 million or whatever it is, just like, all right, you could deal with it. And he makes a lot of sense too. Is just he can pick and pop. It's not what he likes to do. You're going to have to give him like touches, like in the post. Like he wants to take those fallaways. He wants to post up. He did better at that this season. He's better at than he was at punishing mismatches. But there's real risk there too. I just like it because, I think KP and 2 first-round picks as assets are more valuable than Marcus Smart to that specific team at this point, where they had that glut of guards.
Yeah, I do think they got to go. They got to go get somebody to be the offensive organizer.
Maybe one of those guys in Tyus or Monte Morris, just to like have someone like that, or does it need to be higher end?
Well, I think we know who's going to close for them. So like you can get away with it being like a 20-minute a night guy or even less than that. But
that's the other thing though. So the aim will be, and also I said this on my solo pod, like they're like less versatile on defense now.
Oh, way less. They got to play a lot more drop, which they just don't like to do very, it does change that for sure. The switching is going to be short circuited.
And I think we're projecting that you have to change it when it matters most, because I'm assuming you get KP with the intention of he will close, and that you might futz and fiddle with the Horford RW3, but it's almost like they're going to close with 2 bigs is the intention, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think, and don't you think it's probably more likely than not that they lose Grant Williams now? I mean, So that takes that option off the table too. That's another switchy guy that you don't have.
And that's also like now you don't really have, and that, yeah, that really would bankrupt your kind of defensive versus at the 4, because then Jason Tatum is your like backup. Like, what is it? It would be KP or Horford or the 4, and then who else? Jason Tatum, and that's it. Who am I forgetting about on their roster? I guess like Brown or Tatum, you could say, but it would be Tatum. That, like, Blake Griffin coming back. Like, I don't Sam Hauser, if you want to count him. So I wouldn't be shocked if they kept Grant Williams around, to be honest. If he ends up making only like 12 million, whatever his cap hold is.
I'd keep him for 12. I just think he's going to get 17, 18 from somebody. That just feels
not Oklahoma City anymore.
No, not anymore. That's off the table.
Anything else, or are you ready to take us out of here?
Just Brandon Pajemski, just the latest Santa Clara product to climb into the first round on the strength of great education and high moral character and basketball skills. Happy to see that. Happy to see you landed with the Warriors. That's gonna be exciting.
It was written in the stars. He's definitely gonna make the Hall of Fame. There's just no way.
He might play. Like, he might actually play.
You just went through the whole older rookie spiel, and like I would say post CP3 trade, it feels like they're basically done, because you don't have that no-brainer salary to move anymore if you want to make a bigger move. And like Kevon Looney alone, or Jonathan Kuminga even alone, like what are those two like getting you? So
I think they got us. They need. We should do this another time, but they just need another like wing or a forward with size, because like they got smaller. They already did not have size, and they got smaller. So that's going to be the point of emphasis. I think.
Who's their tallest player now? Is it Kuminga?
It might be Patrick Baldwin. Okay. I think he might be 6'10". So which it doesn't take much on this team to be the tallest guy.
He is 6'9". I think that's Kuminga, unless he's 6'8", right?
I think Kuminga's listed at 6'8".
He's listed at 6'7". Yeah, this team is it's up. And what is like Kevon Looney and like Draymond Green are basically both 6'6".
Right.
Kevon Looney's that short.
There's a fun Twitter outcry for bring JaVale McGee back. So now it's him and CP3 can run pick and rolls. Then you'd have a 7-footer.
Yeah, they just have to sign a big body. I mean, JaMychal Green, we assume, is gone.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah. Wow, they are small. Well, on that note,
yeah, I'll take us out. I mean, we just vibe killed the Warriors after Pajemski's going to be fun though. Yeah, everybody, thanks for listening. As always, as Dan mentioned at the top, please rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your enemies. Follow us on our socials at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and TikTok, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. What's our superstar status like on TikTok these days, Dan?
We have almost 2,000 followers. Where videos are not popping like they were. But they're still getting way more views and engagement. So I shouldn't complain that they're not all getting 500,000 views like we were at one point. I can't,
Briefly, we were TikTok superstars.
We felt like
everyone knows that nothing lasts like TikTok stardom. So I can't believe it didn't.
Do you know how much wealthier we are since that we went off on TikTok?
I feel like we lost money, probably.
We did, because of the time I spent editing the videos after we went on.
What else? Buy the merch, because we need that money. Dan wearing the shirt. I got a coffee.
Like $2 a shirt. We haven't even made enough money for me to transfer the money out of the store.
Buy a lot of shirts, lots of them, in bulk. And yeah, thanks again, everybody. I probably forgot stuff, but you know what to do by now. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, rate, review, subscribe. I said all that, and it's getting loopy because it's draft night, and we had a good time here. So shout out to the one and only Frank Ntilikina, and an apology to two one and onlys, Jared Allen.